Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of the Data Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Lee Feinberg. He's a business owner, a data leader, a data specialist, educator, all sorts really. And we're going to be speaking today just around the need to focus on what the customer wants. And I think that lends itself really well to Lee's experience. So yeah, good to have you on board.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rich, for having me. I'm looking forward to having the conversation.
Good. So, I mean, always starting off with this sort of thing. How did you get into data? What's been your journey so far?
Yeah, it's probably like a lot of people by accident, but a lot longer ago. I was working in some internet businesses in the early days of the internet, and we started seeing a lot of the potential for data. And I had a client, and it was really it's kind of funny what happened. They said, "We want to redesign our website." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Well, we just want to redesign it." I said, "Okay, maybe we could look at what's going on the website first." And this is around 2000, so it's pretty early in the days of any kind of data collection and analytics for websites. So they gave me a 50-page Word document, which was just screenshots from their web analytics application. And I said, "Who uses this?" And they said, "Nobody." I said, "Maybe we should look into this." So that was my start of really looking into the analytics side, and took that 50 pages and I made 5 charts. And I said, "Here's the 5 things you need to know before we start this project." And it just kind of opened my eyes to the whole thought about really not being so focused on the data, but really thinking about, what are we trying to achieve here? What's the point of this project? And how do we use data to support the decisions that we're going to use to make what was a pretty big investment?
Yeah. So you sort of fell into it, but did you see straight away that that's where your passion lies? That's where you saw a bit of a gap as well in the market for this type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was such early days in terms of just even the ways to work with data, even things like Excel and PowerPoint. Of course, today we have much more powerful software to get into the data and analyze it. And what really, I think, propelled it was getting in with some other clients. The short story is I went to pitch one of the big digital agencies to work with them because I had my own consulting company. And the CEO said, "That's all nice. Why don't you just come work for us?" And the client... It was a surprise to get that, but the client was IBM. I said, "This is fantastic. I'll go work for them for a little while and work with IBM." And they had a lot of data, and it was the same situation, but I really started focusing on how to leverage the data and not spend so much time working with it and presenting it. So I started getting into visualization tools and things. There was something called Excelsius, which was bought by, I think, Business Objects in the early days, and looking at other kinds of applications to make it much easier to do the presentation and to actually work through the analysis. And that got me onto the whole data visualization space and storytelling, and just continuing to rethink the whole world of how do you work with data and why are you even working with it?
Yeah. And it's the sort of... I suppose what you're saying there in terms of changing views on it, trying to change behaviours as well, sort of links and got you into education as well, right? Because how did that come about?
Yeah, another one of those unexpected turns in my work. As I was going through all of these things I was describing, I was forming some ideas in my head about how do you do the work in a different way, or should you do the work in a different way than had been going on for such a long time, 20 plus years in the world of analysis and business intelligence, which was, here's some data, you have a centralized team that creates some summary charts, sends them out, and that's kind of what everybody works with. And I came from more of a product management, product marketing background. And I had this, I would say eureka moment is probably a little bit too strong a term, but I said, what if we just thought about our work as creating a product? What is that? And I said, that's an interesting idea. And what does that really mean? And as I got deeper and deeper into it, I kept thinking this could really work and changed the approach rather than just having the data and processing it, making charts, taking it and thinking of it as a product. And then you can really think about it from a product management process and a product development process and give it some structure. And then if you have structure, then everybody can start doing the work in a more similar fashion. And of course, all of this centers around thinking about the customer. If you're building a product, you think about the customer. And the clients that I was working with loved this idea and started to ask me if I could teach them how to do it rather than me doing it for them, using it on projects. And I said, I don't know, maybe. Right? Because when you
give it a go.
Right, doing it is easier than teaching it. And because you have to take it out of your head, you know what you're doing. You have to somehow distill it down into something that you can explain, something that's so simple and common to you. You have to figure out how to get the ideas across to somebody completely new to it. And that was the road into the education, is trying to figure out how to do that and continuing to build out that whole idea, and shot me off onto this whole education path. And now I'm also teaching at New York University, and I do work with University of Chicago, and it just was completely unexpected, but I really found enjoyment in doing that. And it pushes my own thinking as well, forces me to refine what I'm doing and simplify it down, right? That they always say, when you can explain it easily, then you've got it down.
Yeah. I can really relate to that. You know, recently building a team here from a recruitment perspective, and it's a total different skill set to try and translate what you know and how you go about things to someone who's completely fresh to recruitment, for example. It's a whole different ball game. And then, okay, so what do you see being, because what you're saying there is really simple, right? It's putting the customer at the forefront of everything, but it sounds simple, but why is it not the case? Why is it not actually common to have that synergy?
Yeah, I think it's everybody's just so focused on data. And when people talk about data, right, just the analysts focus on data, IT people are focused on the data. Even you hear things like data is strategic, or data is the new oil, and these kind of buzzwords that go around. It's like, no, the data is just there to help. And the reason the data exists is to help drive the organization to either, what decisions are you trying to make, and ultimately what actions do you want to take from that. And to me, the data becomes, if you think about it like a movie or story, right? The decisions and the actions are really the stars of this movie and the story, and the data is the supporting actor now. Whereas now it's more the data is the star. And we have to kind of flip it and say, no, it's the customer and what they want that matters. Just like if you're a company making a product, your customer is the goal. It's not the things that go into that matter as much. It's what's the benefit to the customer. That's all that ever really matters. But we've just been so oriented around the data in our little world of analytics that we haven't really made that shift yet.
And why do you feel, what's the blocker? Why do you feel that is the case?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it varies. I think it's a mix of organization structure that's the way the organizations have always worked, that they just have this, we collect the data, we organize it, we clean it, we put it into databases, and then there's people that take it out and analyze it and come up with some analysis. And so now you're talking about restructuring that and rethinking how that flow works. So you still need all those functions. but you have to shift the focus to being customer centric. And then, so that's part one, right? Is just being willing to make that change, which is tough. The second part is thinking about, well, what does that mean when we say, oh, focus on the customer in our world? What are the things you have to do? And that part of that requires, frankly, talking to your customer. And a lot of, so what that means is that you have to train people how to do that. It's easy for me to say, oh, Rich, go and talk to your customer and ask them what they want. I could just say that, right? And you're like, I don't know how to do that. I'm an analyst. I've learned how to be a great analyst and crunch the numbers and work my tools and build my algorithms, but no one ever trained me how to go about talking to people in a way to get that information out of them. It's not that you don't like talking to people, you just don't know the way to do it to get those answers. Other than you saying to me, oh, I just need to know what our sales are. That's the question I need answered. It's pretty weak and vague. And it's not really what you want as the customer. There's something underneath that. There's a reason you might tell me that's what you want. And I have to get that out of you. And so like anything new, people have to be taught. They have to practice it. It's not go and listen to somebody for an hour tell you how to ask questions in a different way. You have to really do it and learn it. And it takes time and it's painful because it's going to be uncomfortable for you to do it because it's new. And so you have to be willing to go through that. And like you said, you had to work with your team and go through new skills. And you have to have people who are running the organization, who are leading it, to help their teammates and their teams through that transition, not just say, go do it and hope that it happens.
Yeah, it's so important, and obviously referring to those softer skills as opposed to the hard sort of technical skills. And how should it be something that's sort of embedded to properly embed in people's career? Does it need to be something that starts from university or courses, whatever, into that first job, part of the interview process, part of the development plans, as much as the technical stuff? So a good balance.
I think from many things. One, just from my own experience, I'm starting to see folks at universities think about those aspects because they've been teaching all of the hard foundational things. How do you write Python code? How do you run some kind of regression analysis? And how do you work with the software that does that? They've been really great on that and helping students graduate with those skills. And I think they're starting to see, number one, that those students need more skills, and thinking about this idea of giving them that better customer perspective. But also from a competitive standpoint, the universities are saying, oh, well, every other university is teaching those same things. How do we differentiate ourselves as a business?
Yeah.
Right. And so they want students to see, oh, yeah, we're going to help you with those new skills. And then I think from a career standpoint, I think it's, again, all the people on your team or other people that are that you'd be competing for on jobs, most of them are probably pretty good at the hard stuff, right? They know how to run, you can teach someone how to run an algorithm. You can teach someone how to do an analysis on something and understand the statistical factors in there, right? And some people will be better at it than others, of course. But then it's like, what really separates you? And I think this is that next thing that people need to think about more, is really how to having these skills to be more part of the business discussion than just the analyst who crunches the numbers in the back room and isn't really in tune with everything else that's going on. And I think it's even harder because the analyst is going to have to work their way into the hearts and minds of the business people to be allowed to do that, because they've been put more in that box, I think, of you're the numbers person.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, because now there's all these roles being created to basically bridge that gap between the technical guys and the business or the customer. But there's an element of, is that enough just to have someone bridging it, or do the individuals have to take accountability for that, on a developer level, analyst, whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's always that role of somebody who can help translate the needs, but I I think there's so much nuance in what somebody asks and why they want it. So, for example, I mentioned this idea if someone says, "Get me that. I'd like to know what the sales are." And if somebody asked me that, it'd be probably pretty easy. I can go pull the sales data. I can give you a bunch of charts and dashboards that show sales by person and year and geography, and I can give you a whole thing. It may not actually address why you wanted that. And even if somebody came to me and gave me a little bit better definition, if I don't truly understand the full depth of it, beyond just reading it on a requirements list, if that's what that intermediate gets, I'm really going to lose the flavor, I think, of what's really needed by not really talking to the customer. I think you could both. I think the intermediate person could do that work as a translator, but I think everybody on the team should be involved in hearing it. And I think there's certainly trends for that if you think about how software is built today, and that's really all someone's doing with this is you're building an application or a presentation of information. It's like building a website almost, if you think about it. So yeah, I think you can't just rely on somebody to pass the information along, because they also have a bias, right? They have a bias, and if you're someone who really gets the data, you also have a different ideas about it than someone who may not work with the data all the time. So I think everybody brings their different set of skills into that customer discussion. I
suppose this is where the role of a data leader comes in as well, right? Because they are facilitating all of this. They're, setting their teams up to have that knowledge. They're promoting that customer focus, but also, again, trying to, at the end of the day, bridging that gap between the business and the data teams as a leader. Do you think this is something that is definitely improving in terms of having that focus, or do you think it's still, a big problem? Obviously, with your experience as well over quite a few years, you would have seen, has this changed quite a bit?
I think there's some change going on in organizations at different levels. So in the last few years, there's been a lot of motion around bringing in people with the title of Chief Data Officer. You see sometimes CDO, but sometimes the D means digital. So you have to be careful when you see that kind of a reference. But I think but what I see and hear, and even what I read, a lot of this Chief Data Officer work is still on getting a handle on the data. What I mean is not the process around the data, but things like data governance and having a cohesive data architecture for the whole organization so that there's one spot where people go to access the data and it's not spread out, and what those rules are. And so I don't think the organizations, and this obviously is not meant to be a blanket statement, but that most people are still focused on that. And so they haven't moved yet to this next phase about getting down into the retraining people and giving them these new sets of skills. They're still of the mindset, well, until the data is organized and perfect, which of course there's no such thing as perfect data anyway. But once we get there, then we can do some of these other things. And I think that's a bad trade-off. I think there's a moderation point where you have to do both. And you can't just wait to feel like all the other pieces are in place before you can get people to that next level. I almost think it's the reverse until that knowing what you want to get out of the data also should drive those other processes. Right? It should be a feedback that says, well, maybe we don't need to spend all our energy on certain sets of data or certain aspects of the technical things we're doing because they're not as important right now based on what we're trying to do and what the business is actually trying to push forward. So I think there's got to be a movement to this other side that is not. It's easier for people to focus on the hard stuff, and I think again that's why it's easy. We need governance, we need this, we need a different database, we need to move into the cloud and do all that now, and so we don't have time or money for the other stuff because of that.
I suppose it's difficult as well, isn't it? Because what we're talking about essentially is, retraining people's soft skills, personalities, essentially getting the best out of them, which is something that just doesn't happen overnight. As you said, it can be quite uncomfortable for people to get themselves out of their comfort zone and learn and gain experiences, not just listen to someone who says, you need to portray yourself in a certain way or you need to communicate like this, but actually real life experience sort of is what gets you there. So I suppose there's an element of, is it going to be number one priority for a data leader when the pressures are coming in from all angles? Is it something that does tend to be down the list a little bit because, it's not an easy thing to tackle?
Yeah, I think it depends on who that data leader is and what their perspectives are. If they've gone through some of these points I'm talking about, they may want to push the organization more around that and demonstrate the ability of their teams and raise that ability, because then the organization will see the real value of moving these ideas and adopting them, because again, it takes both sides. You can't just teach people the soft skills without promoting it into the business side and helping and making sure that everybody goes along the same path. Otherwise, I'll come in and start trying to understand, well, what do you really want, Rich? And why did you ask for that? And I ask you all these questions and you're like, just get me the data, Lee. Right? So you have to have kind of that, I'll say, air cover from the leaders to help the business say, look, we're changing how we work. And it's going to be different for you and different for us. And we need to do it together. But this is the strategy that we're pursuing. It's not just technique per se. We're not just changing the way we gather requirements. We're really changing the way we do our work. And this is a piece of it. And it all fits together. And so you really need them to have that level of support. And so it goes pretty deep in terms of the leadership. And
he's trying to get across. Yeah, and he's trying to get across, obviously, that it's all with the customer in mind, whatever that customer may be, internal, external, whatever, but it's all with that in mind. I mean, from just thinking about the hiring processes and, what's going on at the moment, the amount of time that companies and hiring managers are spending on assessing soft skills as opposed to just the hard stuff has changed massively. When I joined recruitment circa 8 years ago, it definitely wasn't, it was, can they communicate? Can you have a conversation with them? Great. That's fine. That's tick the soft skills off. Let's move on to the hard stuff. But in reality now it's very much 50-50 with the majority of companies that we work with, which is good to see, because they obviously see the value in it. But it's also a bit daunting if you're, someone developing your career and you feel that is a weakness for you. But I think these companies aren't necessarily expecting people to be the finished product, and you need to be able to present. You need to be able to do that. It's more, do they show the right characteristics to learn that? Are they going to throw themselves into outside of their comfort zone and develop that skill set? And I think, it's hard enough to recruit in this market. It's hard enough to recruit in data. There's a massive skill shortage amongst most of the opportunities that we're looking at. But the companies that are hiring based just as much on someone's softer skills are the ones that are winning, because they're seeing past some of those. Do you have experience in Tableau? Like you said, do you have expertise in Tableau? Okay, no, but you have a similar tool. Great. And you've got the right characteristics. Then we can get you up to speed. They're not as black and white as they used to be. And I think companies need to be that way. I mean, from your point of view, you're obviously working with students, right? Coming into this, what feedback do you get to them about? Do they have some confusion around what they need to be developing? Is this something you discuss with them?
Yeah, I think with one of the programs I'm working on, that it's basically the faculty at the university that's starting to change their perspective, and they're thinking about what they want to teach, and that they've all been focused on the algorithms and, you know, how do you do an analysis and some of the analytic methods that you might use. And they're starting to realize that this whole communications aspect is something that's almost completely lacking in what they're teaching. And they're struggling to figure out how to weave it in, because for so long their programs have built a certain way, right? Oh, we're going to teach week 1, we're going to do this, and week 2 we're going to run this Python thing, and so forth. And the area that I've been working mostly with is these more graduate students, and they have their capstone projects, their final projects they've put together, and then they have to come and do a presentation, not only to their client, but they usually do something to the team of professors. And so we're working with them to give them a program to help those students. Again, you can say, oh, write a story about it. And they're going to say, well, I don't even know what that means. You know, what does it mean to write a story about my data? How do I reconstruct it? So it's almost what I'm helping them do is break it down and making it like a formula almost, to say, here's how you start. So instead of trying to teach the students all of these skills that you might be able to do in the corporate world, is giving them enough to reframe how they approach it. And most of them start with, here's all the data we had, and here's how we cleaned it, and then here's how we analyzed it, and then the last 5 minutes is the recommendation. So they have it's like 90+% of the talk is on all the stuff that I have to convince them the client doesn't really care about. The customer assumes you're good at all that, to do your project. What they really care about is, I always say, what's in it for them. That's all they care about. Yeah. And the students they hate to hear that, because they're so proud of their work. So when you come in and say, that's nice, but this is the end result is what's so important, it's difficult for them sometimes to internalize that, and to flip it and say, you got to hit them first with the big pitch. Here's what we figured out, and here's how you're going to make a lot of money, or here's how you're going to make your employees happier, or here's how you're going to reduce your production, whatever that is, right? Whatever the discovery is. And then that's where you want to focus more of your time in presenting. And then you could tell them a little bit about the story of the data and just to fill in the gaps. But if there's something interesting there too, right? The fact that you ran 6 algorithms and chose these 2 out of the 6, most of them probably don't care or understand. And you're certainly not going to make them understand in 5 minutes what you spent an entire semester finessing. So
that's it, right?
But it's hard. Yeah. But I think helping them do that, the reason we tell them this is so important, not only because you're great and your professors expect it now, is when you go and talk to prospective employers and you come in and tell them, they say, well, tell me something you did at school. And that's how you start the conversation. They're going to see a completely different side of you than if you start with the numbers and spitting out all the algorithms and we did that and that, which is what, again, most other people they're doing the same thing. So it's a way for them to really help themselves in the job market.
Yeah, I think some people get a realization when they do come out of university at just how far off they are for some of these positions, because they're suddenly being assessed on things that they simply haven't been taught or haven't spent enough time in. I mean, I suppose to sum this up, what would be, from a data leader's perspective, what would be some advice around how to go about embedding this customer focus into the work you're doing from every stage, so it's not just an afterthought, so it's not just, someone's job to try and connect the dots afterwards?
Yeah, I think the first part of that is it takes a while. It's not an overnight, because you're really changing the strategy, if you will, of how the what the data team, or whatever they're called in your organization, what they're delivering. And you have to set those expectations not only with the people on your team, but the folks that they're delivering to. And so you have to, based on what you know about your own organization, pick the spot where you think you can be most effective, whether it's just doing better analysis and getting the recommendations out and making those sharper, if it's understanding the pure customer need better. There's so many different flavors. Getting better at just communicating and presenting visually is a whole nother factor, right? It's not about knowing how to use the tools, the applications. Doesn't matter what they are, right? You have to know how to use it to present information in a way that the readers can absorb it. I could make either awful charts or great charts, and knowing how to do that in the way that best gets the ideas out is helpful. So there's so many different factors. You have to know probably where you're the weakest. And then you have to stick with it, because it's going to take a long time, because, again, you're changing course. And it's not about going into a workshop, say, okay, Rich, go take this workshop for 2 days and come back and
you'll be a master.
you're talking about changing people's attitudes and behaviors, and you have to keep pushing them. So I think as a leader, you have to not just set the course, but you have to support your people and keep helping them along that path when they get stuck, and not letting them fall back into their old behaviors, because it's easy for someone to say, oh, it's taking too long to do it this way. I'll just do it the old way, right? And if you let that creep in and don't push people to be accountable, say, no, Rich, you have to do it this new way. It's not acceptable to just fall back. It's okay if you take a little more time. We understand. We know you're frustrated. We know it's hard, right? Kind of give them that mental and true support, other than just, do it this way. You have to really encourage them and build that in as a leader.
Yeah, I think it's even now more than ever, data leaders are, sales, basically. There's a lot of selling, a lot of influencing from all directions. And from this, in particular, it's about selling what it's going to make a difference to their career and what it's going to make a difference to the business. Because let's be honest, I think you touched upon it earlier, but those who can not only have those hard skills, but also have the soft skills to back it up, can translate what they're doing, can communicate, have an abundance of options with their career, don't they? At the end of the day, they're the people that business is investing.
Yeah, I think even the analysts are salespeople, because if they're the ones coming out and making a recommendation, they have to be able to persuade somebody that it's a good idea and why, and that they should either invest money in a different way or a new way, stop making a product, invest in this marketing channel, whatever it is, right? These can be huge decisions for a company. Even small decisions, you still have to persuade people and make some case for it. And it's not just about, well, here are the numbers. It speaks for itself. That world is going away. It's not there anymore. And you can't survive as a business if that's how you're going to operate with your data. You're not being really strategic about it if you just push it out there and expect things to happen easily. It's tough.
And I think that's a common problem. That's a common problem for feedback that I get. But look, I think it's been really good hearing about your experiences, Lee. To be honest, it's a really important topic, and I hope the message gets out there. I think people just need to invest more time in developing these type of skills, and from a leader's perspective, trying to facilitate that, trying to be the one who's driving that forward. But yeah, it's been really good speaking to you, Lee. Thanks for getting involved.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rich. Really enjoyed the conversation.